team is going to work. Great, thank you. So thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope the sun is shining wherever you are as well. It's a very nice April spring day. My name is Nicole Silliman, and I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio Children's Trust Fund. As you all are probably aware, April is Child Abuse Prevention Month. And so as part of Prevention Month, we are excited to be offering weekly prevention webinars regarding a whole bunch of different topics and subjects related to prevention, impacts of programs and services on families. And so today is our first prevention webinar. For just some housekeeping items, we are requesting that everyone please make sure you stay on mute during today's presentation. We just want to make sure we alleviate any background noise. Additionally, we do have over 100 folks who registered for today's presentation. So if you have any questions, comments, things that you want to connect us to, if you would feel free to drop that in the chat. And then we will make sure that we are monitoring that throughout the course of today's presentation. If it's something that requires follow-up, we will make sure that we follow up with you and connect you to any resources or share information out with the group. But we're hoping that folks wouldn't mind utilizing the chat for that purpose. And without anything else that I want to add, I just want to go ahead and introduce Crystal Milner, who is an early childhood mental health consultant with Nationwide Children's Hospital. We've been working with Nationwide Children's Hospital for many, many years now, and we're really excited to showcase the expertise of their team and some of the work that they've been doing. So I will kick it over to Crystal, and thank you all.
Thank you, Nicole. Hello, everybody. Yes, my name is Crystal Milner, and I am also a facilitator for Triple P, the Positive Parenting Program with Nationwide Children's Hospital's Behavioral Health Department. Today, the topic that I'm going to speak on is how trauma affects relationships. With the current position that I have, and previously I was trained with Dr. Bruce Perry's neurosequential model in education, just the whole brain dynamics and how trauma does affect children and people in general. How it affects relationships was really important to me. So to come together and put both of these jobs to work helped me create this presentation just to give some awareness on the importance of both, but also what we do with Triple P and how it connects. So thank you guys for joining me. I do appreciate it. First time I've ever done this, so beyond the group of people that I know. So I thank you guys for joining and giving me this experience. So today what I'm going to discuss is the brain's job, just its very basic core functions. I will speak on how the core functions can be disrupted based on trauma. I'll go over the importance of relationships and emotional safety, and then I will also give you a little information on what Triple P is and how Triple P relates to relationships and emotional safety. Again, so we'll go through this. If you have any questions, throw them in the chat. We'll try to get to them today. If not, we will make sure we answer them later. But the brain, it has so many different functions, but what are the core functions? The core functions are to keep us alive. So to stay alive is one of the core functions of the brain. The next function is to procreate. And the third is to protect and nurture dependence. With the stay alive, the brain stem, the very most simplistic part of the brain, keeps us regulated enough to stay alive. It regulates our body temperature, our blood pressure, our heart rate, breathing, even the things as simple as swallowing and sleeping. We think that this is something that our body just naturally knows how to do. And in a sense it does, but that is the brain stem's very basic job, is to keep us alive. It relays information to and from our brain to the rest of the body. So it plays a very important role in consciousness, awareness, and movement. To procreate, Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. So it is to evolve. Our brain's job is to reproduce so that we can acquire resources, find a mate, and make a baby and keep this system going. And then to protect and nurture our dependents is that third core function. We have a protective instinct. There is a neurobiological trick that makes sure we take care of our offspring. The neural systems that mediate our stress response, procreation, reproduction, our social affiliation, and communication is all interrelated. So they share the same fundamental neurotransmitters that we get pleasure from. So we find pleasure in taking care of our children, procreating, and of course, staying alive. So the brain has so many other functions, but that's the very basic that we'll look at today to look at the importance of relationships and how trauma affects those core functions. It'd be a good idea to kind of just give a brief overview of the brain and how it develops. So the brain does develop from the bottom up and then also inside out. So we have the brainstem, which is developed during pregnancy. The diencephalon, or you can also call that the midbrain. It's developed through toddlerhood. So we also call it the toddler brain, and it mediates movement. The limbic system, can also call that the teenage brain. It goes from adolescents, 11 years old to 15-year-olds, and it mediates our emotions. So that's why when we have our teens, or maybe sometimes when we get really, really upset, and we'll talk about that, we kind of go back down into that teenage brain full of emotions we're trying to figure out during that time frame. And then our cortex, our mid to late 20s is when that's developed, and we get our critical thinking. All of these systems are there at birth. They're just not developed all at birth. And so as we go through the different stages and ages of life, we build that up. The brainstem, what we'll kind of focus on most of the time, filters information by one, is it safe? And two, is it familiar? So the environment mom is in while pregnant, it plays a huge role in the development of a child's nervous system. The child's nervous system is developed in utero and plays a role in the child's temperament. So whether the child is quiet, social, laid back, or short-tempered, all of these things are determined during that time. And this is where we find our first little dose of rhythm. Rhythm regulates, and it's developed in the womb with the mother's heartbeat. So the rhythm signifies also the temperament of the child, depending upon the environment that the mom is in. When they talk about making sure we are not, stressed out during pregnancy, and we're in, a good state and getting self-care and rest, that is why. When I was young and had my first baby, all I knew was to try to stay stress-free. They never told me why, but later throughout my career in education, I realized the real importance is because this little person is being developed in our baby, and that neural nervous system is being developed during that time, plays a huge, huge role. So we'll show this again a little later within the webinar, but I thought it would be a good idea to kind of let everybody see where we are in our brain and what's taking place during those stages. So what disrupts a caregiver's instinct to protect and nurture? Traumatic events disrupt a caregiver's instinct to protect and nurture. Traumatic events include the ACEs, so adverse childhood experiences, but also other chronic stressors that are unpredictable, severe, and prolonged. So not something something traumatic isn't just those things, those really big things that happen. It's also those things that happen over a long period of time that we are not predicting. Things such as living in a home with abuse or no stability, poverty, racism, community trauma, historical or generational trauma, things from slavery, the Holocaust, the violent colonization of Native Americans, just to name a few. serious injury, and even invasive medical procedures could be considered traumatic events. As you see on the screen on the left-hand side, the three types of ACEs are abuse, so physical, emotional, sexual, neglect, physical and emotional, and then also household dysfunction, so mental illness, incarceration of a relative, a mother treated violently within the home, substance abuse, divorce. I know it points out the mother being treated violently, but any type of violence, whether mother, child, or father, we know that that also happens too. So that type of household dysfunction is considered ACEs. I think sometimes we forget about those little things that might play a part. Even just not spending enough quality time with our kids can be looked at as neglect. And so those are some of those traumatic things that kind of get in the way to our instincts of protecting and nurturing. There's things that we could be or could have dealt with. And those stages that we go through in development can be challenged during that time. Trauma can also take place inside of the womb, and those are called intrauterine insults. So the maternal stress that I mentioned, toxic substances, malnutrition, infections. So think back to that environment while the mother is pregnant. If those things are going on, it's all affecting that nervous system of the baby when they come out. Traumatic events disrupt our sense of control, connection, and our meaning. Trauma damages relationships and has an effect on the psychological and emotional safety. They also can prevent and disrupt development of the neural systems, as I mentioned, while the baby is being developed. But if we don't learn those things when we come out, it kind of stays that way. What we don't use, we lose to a certain degree. If we don't find the way to get that healing to take place and to reach those places that may have been missed. It messes with all of these different events, our neural system, so where we get pleasure from. So where we get pleasure from helps us take care of our babies, but if those are disrupted, it takes away that natural instinct that we have. Trauma changes the way the brain functions. When something traumatic happens, the brain shuts down all non-essential systems and it moves into the lower brain system. So the very basic functioning that I mentioned in the brainstem that keeps us alive and safe, regulating the temperature, our blood pressure, even all of those things down to swallowing can be affected when we go through traumatic situations. It's just trying to keep us alive and safe. And that's where we're in self-preservation mode. We're in that fight, flight, or freeze, or possibly even fawn. Trauma can take the priority away from our children and cause holes in communication and relationship building. So that picture that you see to the right, where it has the behavior and the physical and mental health, all of these things are things that kind of get in the way and take the priority away from our children. If we have those things going on the left-hand side, it can change our interest in physical activity. We may get into those different type of substance abuses, which also will take us away from the time that we spend with our kids and building the relationships. And then the missing work kind of puts us into this system of not having all of our needs being met. But all of these things are the things that kind of get into the way of the relationships that we have with our kid. When I first learned this, I'm looking at this screen and going back to my childhood. If you're in mental health or you've taken any type of workshop or class on trauma, they throw this up and we're looking and we're counting all of the things that we've dealt with in our life. I know I could probably pull a couple off of this list, just like some of you. And the help and encouragement and support and relationships you have in your life truly are the things that determine how you get past these situations or able to function through these situations. So now that we've learned about, or maybe got a refresher on the abuse, the neglect, and the things that can be looked at as traumatic. What does it do to our brain? So this is one of those things that when I was being trained with Dr. Bruce Perry's neurosequential model in education, we looked at the stress response continuum, and it gave us, this picture that I still find so very helpful today when I'm working with families, or even myself or my children, just knowing where I am in my mind and my body. And so I'll go through this chart just to kind of give you an idea of what that looks like. On the left-hand side, it lets you know what the rest of the chart is looking at. So the first line across is going over the sense of time. The second is the parts of our brain that is being utilized when we're in this state. Our cognition, so where we're at cognitive level, and how we're dealing with things. Our mental state or our state of arousal is the next line down. The reward that we're receiving in this stage that we're in is that last kind of cream line, and then the bottom gray is going to kind of show you where we're at as well if we've had traumatic situations. So the impact of trauma is very dysregulating to our nervous system, which affects our body and mind and keeps us in an alarm state response, searching for relief. Without the proper tools to combat the effects of trauma or regulate our mind and our body, we seek unhealthy coping mechanisms that give off an immediate reward. So if you look at that middle row or semi-middle row where the pink and red is, the alarm state is most consumers who have had any type of ACEs or traumatic situations. This is where they are 80% of the day. With being in an alarm state, with your brain being dysregulated, you're irrational. You are in your teenage brain, so the midbrain, very emotional. This is where you're probably seeing people yelling, screaming. Kids are having tantrums. Big people are having adult-sized tantrums. This is a very emotional state. And the sense of time that we have when we are in an alarm state of mind is hours and minutes. You cannot associate actions with consequences. And that reward that our body is searching for in this state could be salty, fatty, sweet, spicy snacks. We're looking for an adrenaline rush and intensity, and those foods kind of trigger that in our brains. I don't know about you guys, but as soon as I'm feeling a little bit dysregulated or overwhelmed, I immediately want some ice cream. It's ice cream or pizza for me. But outside of those type of foods or snacks, you can also crave drugs and alcohol, sex, and other risky behaviors. So that immediate rush that we're looking for is what comes in the alarm state. I'll go from the back to the very far left where we're at in calm, and then finish with the very highest level in terror. But to back up, when we are calm, we're in a relaxed state. The sense of time that we're able to think about is the extended future. We are using our neo and subcortex. So we're in our thinking brain. The only time we can truly be calm is in solitude. So when we're by ourselves, because there's no external stimulation that is distracting us from the calm. I'm not sure if all you guys know, but I'll throw it out there. It's a fine line between too much isolation and the solitude that is aligned with our values and beliefs, and we're able to get those rewards from that. So we don't want to spend too much time together, too much time apart, because relationships are important. But when you are feeling overwhelmed and stressed out, getting into solitude and calming yourself can be very helpful. The next state that we would be in is alert. And contrary to like alert, feeling like you're always on alert and maybe looking out for things to harm you, you're actually engaged and in your learning zone. So this is the good part of stress. Your cognition is concrete. You can have some concrete thinking. You're in your subcortex and still a little bit in your limbic system. And you can think days and hours out. The goal is to truly be here 80% of your day. The reward in this state is adding social relationships, to be relational. So this is where it's really important to have people, and you want to be around people in this state. We'll skip over alarm because we talked about that. The next level from alarm in dysregulation is fear, and that's where we're in our fight, flight, and freeze response. We're very reactive in this state, and we are in our midbrain and brainstem. So mostly functioning from our toddler brain. In this state, this is where, like I mentioned, fight, flight, or freeze. But if it's a little one, this is where they may be walking away or running from us, or kicking and wailing their feet and body, because in that toddler brain, it's more about movement. And we're only thinking minutes and seconds. So we cannot think that far out when we're in fear. And the only reward that you can get in this state is the removal of distress. So if you are with someone who is regulated to this sense, the best thing to do is to get parallel with them. So not dead on. Do not use a lot of words, and to just be there, to make sure, that they're safe and in a good space, but not a lot of words. A lot of times, I think when we're working with our children or talking to them and asking them to do things, we have a whole lot of words and we're not realizing it is doing the opposite of what we want. Whether child or adult, if someone is in their fight, flight, or freeze, and they're in fear, it doesn't necessarily have to be physical fear, but they're scared. A lot of talking's not helping them. They cannot process what it is that we're telling them. So when we are, what are you doing? Why did you do it? Why do you have the teacher calling? If we get that, I don't know, or they can't answer, they truly cannot answer in that state. In a conscious way. So keep that in mind when you're working with people and you know that they're in a state of fear. The next state is terror or panic. The only thing that we can do in this situation when someone is in this space is to control the environment. So not the person, just make sure that they're in a safe place. They are reflexive in this state. They are in their brainstem. So the very basic functioning, nothing more than that. They could get a loss of consciousness, so may not even remember what happened in this instance. The reward is to back up and be quiet. They may rock or self-stim. They're trying to get their bodies back regulated. It's the very least part of the brain, so the brainstem, it's all it can do. And think back to when we're babies, what helps a baby is the rocking, and some of the little ones, the self-stimming. Even for some of us, I don't know if you guys have found yourself maybe feeling a little overwhelmed or in a training, sitting way too long, and next thing you know, you're just rocking, you're getting yourself together. But in the bottom, in the gray, you will see the adaptive response to each mental state. This is based on a child who has had adverse or traumatic experiences. Different children have different responses, but in this example, it will show that most males are more hyper-aroused, where females dissociate more often than not. But of course, we will have vice versa. A male child could be disassociative and a female child could be hyper-aroused. But in the state of calm, male or female child will be in a rest mode. In alert, a hyper-aroused child will be vigilant. So what they'll be doing is trying to keep careful watch for danger or difficulties. And this is an alert when they're supposed to be in a learning state of mind where they're able to get information and apply it. But if you're living in that fight, flight, or freeze, you're still on edge a good portion of the time. For someone who is disassociative, they avoid. So they're trying to escape or distract themselves from difficult feelings, thoughts, and situations. In the alarm state, hyper-aroused child or person will be resistant. So they'll want to refuse situations and, stay away from them. Someone who is disassociative. So there's that thing where you think people may push away, but that's kind of where the fawn comes in at, where whether they agree with it or not, they can't get outside of themselves to express the fear that they have. So they just go with the flow to keep themselves safe, or what they believe will keep them safe. In the middle state of fear, someone who is hyper aroused will be defiant. Someone who is disassociative will disassociate even more. And then in terror, someone who is hyper aroused will become aggressive, and someone who is disassociative may faint. So they lose all consciousness. And that's the best way that they can keep themselves safe in that situation. So this is kind of just an overall look of where our brain is at in the different states, the different mental states or states of arousal. Again, when I see someone who seems a little bit dysregulated, upset, or fearful, it takes my brain right back here. Or even when I'm overwhelmed, like I mentioned, when I start craving something, I'm like, stop. What's going on, Crystal? How are you feeling? So hopefully, if you have never seen this before, this will kind of give you an idea of who you're dealing with when they're in a certain mental state. And again, if our kids are mad, sad, upset, scared because they did something we told them not to do, and we're a little dysregulated, now we're raising our voice, just remember, one of the important things to me is that they are not thinking of consequences, and truly are not being, in a sense, we think manipulative, trying to get out of situations. Their brain truly cannot function. What is going on in that state? Even if we get an answer that seems like it makes sense, but it's irrational, it's for a reason. So thought this would be something that would be good to kind of point out to everybody. I'm just looking, I saw some stuff pop up. What I'm going to talk about next is just the importance of relationships and emotional safety. Here we go. So there's some different attachment brain's job is to try to figure out how things are going. I just got a message that my internet is unstable. So if I go out, send me a chat, let me know. And I think I do see that. Am I still frozen?
We can hear you, but as you flip to this slide, anything you said to kick off this slide, we could not hear. If you just want to start from the beginning from this slide.
Yes. Okay. I was just saying I got the message that my internet was unstable. So thank you for letting me know. Yes. So this slide is covering the importance of relationships and emotional safety. Emotional safety refers to an emotional state achieved in attachment relationships. Attachment is based on the memory of our first relationship. Typically, that is with our parent or caregiver. Relational and emotional safety is the first step to build trust, not just within a child, but with anyone. So it helps us be able to regulate with it. It helps us be able to help them regulate in our presence with us, or with us in being present with them. Relationships are so important. Emotional safety means parenting in a way where the child feels safe enough to be themselves, to be open, to be vulnerable, and it offers a space where their ideas and feelings can be expressed with confidence. In an emotional safe environment, there's clear boundaries and expectations, because that helps create a level of predictability and consistency in emotions and behaviors. That's where that routine and repetition comes in at. It's hard for us to sometimes be consistent in those things, but it truly creates safety a lot with children. Even if they push back, knowing what's happening and what's going to happen creates regulation. It also helps with the moments where correction and challenging behaviors are needed, if it's done with honesty and respect. So building that relationship, letting our children know that they can be open and vulnerable and tell us things and not get in trouble for it, creates that open space where they do want to talk to us and can trust us with how they're feeling. As a parent myself, sometimes we're so scared that our response may seem like our kids are in trouble or it's dysregulated and very exciting, but that challenges them to wonder if they're in trouble or feeling safe. So just being open as well with our kids is so helpful. One of the things that I liked when researching just what emotional safety is and what that environment looks like is also saying that boundaries are necessary. Yes, we want a space where they can talk to us, feel safe and open and vulnerable to tell us all of the things that they're dealing with, but that doesn't mean that we still don't create boundaries and limits for them. Those are absolutely necessary when dealing with situations with our kids or people in general. Our relational and social environment defines where we are in our state of arousal. So thinking back to that stress response continuum that I showed you, if there's a healthy, positive relationship in a heightened state, so whether we're in alarm, fear, or terror, a dysregulated child or person is more likely to trust us in that situation and trust the situation more as well. Positive interactions and relationships quiet the stress response and it activates the reward system to the brain. So again, creating that safety. I'm not sure if you guys heard when I went over the attachment style, so I'll do that briefly too. If you look at the screen, there is a secure and positive attachment style, and that's where needs are met all of the time with love. And what that builds is trust in what seems like a chaotic environment. Needs are met some of the time by some people. And what that kind of creates is suspicion, and people in those environments and children will test relationships, see, what is safe, what isn't safe, what they can do, what they can't do, and how consistent will be in those situations with the people that they are looking to for authority or just to keep them safe. So they will test relationships if needs aren't being met. The last attachment style here is negative, where needs are not met or there is neglect and abuse present. There's no trust. They will become withdrawn, and they can also possibly be aggressive. So those are the different type of attachment styles. In connection with Triple P, so the Positive Parenting Program, this environment is touched on under the 5 principles of positive parenting. It just goes over the importance of relationships and the time that we spend with our kids and talking with them and showing affection. All of these things create emotional safety and builds the relationships with our kids. Something that I think as the years have passed on and we've gotten so much technology and social media, it's taken some of that relationship building time away from families in general. And that's what Triple P is really helpful in. Triple P, the Positive Parenting Program, is a system of evidence-based education and support for parents and caregivers of children and adolescents. Triple P has tailored support for every family. We have been in effect for 30 years and counting, so we're supported by extensive research based information, and there's proven results. It improves parenting skills and confidence. Triple P, the Positive Parenting Program, is designed to prevent behavioral and emotional problems in children and teenagers. We aim to prevent problems in family, school, and community before they arise, and it aims to equip parents with the skills and confidence they need to be self-sufficient and to be able to manage family issues without ongoing support. So we're there to kind of help families with some of the practical strategies and skills that you're probably using on a regular basis, but to give and help with the confidence of knowing that you can manage this without ongoing support. So we are a preventative program. What can Triple P do? So with prevention, we prevent behavioral, emotional, and developmental problems in children. We reduce the incidence of child maltreatment in the community. We enhance the knowledge, skills, and confidence of parents. And we build upon parent strengths and abilities to be self-sufficient and self-reflective. As parents, we are the experts on our kids. And Triple P, the facilitators within this program, use the strengths and the knowledge as the experts that parents have to just help them go through some of those challenging moments in parenting. It's going to happen. It just automatically will, because these little people have their own free will. And as they're growing and learning and trying to figure out the ins and outs and rights and wrongs, that's where we come in and help them and guide them through those situations. And so this program kind of helps with just real practical strategies. We're in 13 different counties within Ohio, but there is also, if Triple P is not in your area, Triple P Online. Ohio just rolled out free access to Triple P Online, the self-paced modules for parents and caregiver throughout the entire state for free. So that's amazing. There's 2 online programs, one for caregivers of children ages 0 to 12 and one for caregivers of children 10 to 16. So the Triple P Teen program. This is very exciting and a great resource, especially for families who live outside of areas without local Triple P providers or who are otherwise unable to attend the groups. It's Triple P Online. It's an online version. So if you cannot get in person with us or through Zoom, it is still the same effective Triple P program. It's available in English and Spanish. And there's sequential models. They include video clips of families in action. They're interactive exercises. They help with individual goal setting and prompting for self-evaluation, how things are going through learning new strategies or refreshing your strategies with the Triple P program. There's electronic worksheets and resources and personalized electronic parent workbooks. And there's also a facilitator that can offer free coaching calls. So they'll review and go over reminder strategies with you. So Triple P is available to everyone in Ohio in some way, shape, or form. What I like to do for people who are learning about Triple P, but also very interested in emotional safety or how the brain works through these different aspects is shown here. I mentioned we get back to a picture of the brain's development, but also in relation to Triple P, how we do our strategies. So how Triple P relates to emotional safety. Again, on a very basic level, the brain develops from the bottom up We also know inside out, but we're going to go with the bottom up for now. At the bottom is the brainstem. As I mentioned, its main job is to keep us alive. So that's the picture to the left. We're back at the brain. In the brainstem, there is no reasoning, no critical thinking. It just isn't developed yet. So they're there, but it's not developed. The brainstem filters the information by, is it safe? Is it familiar? The brainstem is where the brain goes when it is dysregulated. So when we're in our fight, flight, or freeze, that's where we reside. When dysregulation is present, relationships, consistency, and routine is the very most important for regulation to happen because it creates safety. So with triple P, the graph that you see to the right, we also work from the bottom up. The levels within triple P are aligned with how the brain develops. So what the brain can handle and what skills need to be taught to develop appropriately. I won't go through every single strategy, but I'll give you the headings for the start of the strategies. You can check us out yourself and utilize the services to get all of those. But with developing from the bottom up, developing those positive relationships are really important within our program, just like it is with the brain. So triple P, we're aligned with how the brain develops and what the brain can handle and what skills need to be taught to develop appropriately. So if we can master the bottom up or the bottom two on both of the charts, we may have the privilege to connect to a dysregulated child, adolescent, or even an adult's brain because we've built the relationship that has to be built first to create trust and to create bonds. So with triple P, those first two levels, developing the positive relationship, but also encouraging positive behavior. And that's just going through how we spend time and how we're teaching skills to, or modeling the behaviors that we want to see with our children and how we encourage it. Safety is what the brain needs to develop. So as we work our way up the brain, the more strategies we can apply. So we go from developing the positive relationship, encouraging positive behavior, and then we can get into teaching new skills and behaviors. That's where we kind of reach that limbic system in the cortex of the brain, where we're helping it develop to the states that it's supposed to be in each level of the brain. We'll work our way up. The top state for triple P is managing the behavior. There's two strategies within the managing behavior, or we also kind of call that guiding children's behavior. That feels out of place to me, but it also gives the brain what it needs. And we have other strategies to manage misbehavior, but the top two that we get to when things get to a space of feeling a bit out of control is quiet time and timeout. Through different programs, I believe that timeout and quiet time was looked at as something that was punitive. And so you have a whole bunch of people now who are like, oh, that never works. Timeout does not work. It is not used or should not be used to punish. Within triple P, it is truly used as a regulation break so that we can get back to a space of alert where we can be regulated and in our learning state of mind. Quiet time and timeout is used when a child can no longer take instruction and they're dysregulated to the point where no information or strategy is going to be effective in managing the behavior. So in a sense, they're in fight, flight, or freeze mode. To gain calm, we must go back to the brainstem. So we have to go all the way back to the bottom of the brain, but also the bottom of the strategies if you're utilizing the triple P skill set so that we can offer a space of regulation. So a little time either just sitting off to the side or completely by themselves so that they can get back regulated into a space where instructions can be processed and skills can be learned. So they're in a space where they can actually hear what we're saying and process that information. Some situations only call for removing our attention. We know what we give attention to increases. So sometimes we have to take that attention away. Just like I mentioned with quiet time, setting them off to the side, but others require the removal of all external stimulation. So when we get into that fear and terror state, if you remember that stress response continuum, where there's a lot of emotional and movement going on. So we're back down into our toddler brain, and a form of our teenage brain sometimes requires that external stimulation is removed. That quiet time or timeout is very valuable, not just to the kids. Sometimes we need it too. Because a dysregulated adult cannot or will not be able to regulate a dysregulated child. We feed off of the energy that we're getting from people, whether we're children or adults. If someone is dysregulated, you kind of feel it in your body. So do children. You can feel it in your body. You're recognizing it through the tone and also through the facial expressions. So we achieve calm in solitude with no external stimulation. After regulation, after a regulation break and the child is calm, we can go back to working the strategies within Triple P from the bottom up. Bottom up with Triple P gets us bottom up with the brain. So the more comfortable, the more regulated we can reach the higher levels of the brain. So with Triple P, we talk about the positive parenting program. So why the positive approach to parenting? It's really as simple as to fight off the power of negative input. Another thing that the brain does is it pays more attention to negative comments than to positive ones. I know we've all heard any attention is good attention. Not necessarily so, but there is a bias related to the brain's primary job to keep us alive. So in survival, it's supposed to look out for the negative things so that we can keep ourselves safe and what to look out for. It's just sometimes it doesn't serve the best purpose, especially if we've been through trauma or have had adverse childhood experiences. It's going to focus on those things a lot more than the positive things. So in general, negative comments are 3 to 5 times more powerful than positive. So we have to be very intentional and focus on the positive. Kind of train ourselves to do that. Another thing that we want to do with the positive approach is to kind of keep that eye on low caregiver and child ratio. In those atmospheres, it's a little easier to be more negative or to have more negative comments due to the need to be reactive and protective. Sometimes in those single family homes or in those environments where there's so many children, I'm thinking of school in this instance, there's so many children, but not enough adults to monitor all of them. We end up being a little more reactive and protective in those situations. 2 things that I think are important to remember, and I mentioned it, but I'll say it one more time. If a child is dysregulated, whining, crying, yelling, screaming, etc., they're not in a space to hear us lecture or talk a lot. They're not in a space where they can learn new lessons, comprehend instructions fully, or even associate consequences with an action. That's why regulation is necessary before we move forward. And a dysregulated adult cannot regulate a dysregulated child. We must be regulated too. And I think that was one of the reasons why this presentation that I did for something else was important for this time of the year for child abuse prevention. Sometimes we're so dysregulated we don't realize that our kids are dysregulated too, and they cannot reach their brain. Sometimes we can't either, and that's how abuse and neglect happens. We're so dysregulated, we're not thinking of the consequences or able to process what should be done in a more positive or healthy light. And so just remembering how the brain works and where it's at when it's in self-preservation mode would be so helpful, not only to adults, but more so to the little ones who need us to guide them through this challenging world that we're in. This next slide is basically just some resources that I used for this presentation, but also through my journey of learning about trauma and working with families, but more so the trauma. It's just some resources here, but that is the presentation. We can look at some of the questions if there are any, Nicole, or do a close and get to some of the questions later.
I think most of the questions, and correct me if I'm wrong, are about whether or not they'll have access to the slides and if you'll be able to share this, which I believe we will be able to share out the slides after the fact. But I guess because we do have a little bit of time, I'm wondering, and then somebody asked for your contact information. If anybody has any questions that we can have Crystal answer while she's here today.
I do see the comment on contact. So if you are looking for more information on Triple P with Nationwide Children's Hospital, I do handle Franklin County. Our whole team handles Franklin, Fayette, Richland, and Crawford County. I will put my contact in the chat, but it does look like Nicole has put the link for Triple P for the state, just in case you are not in an area where there is a local facilitator, you'll be able to get information there as well.
Thank you, Crystal. And the link that I shared connects you to the Triple P Ohio website in and of itself, and then specifically to the Find a Provider kind of subpage of the Triple P Ohio website, and it actually has then available classes throughout the state from trained Triple P providers in case anybody just wants to figure out who their provider is or how to get connected. But you know, we have been investing a lot in Triple P, and so I think today's presentation was really great to connect that program specifically to what is happening with the brain, how this is affecting children's behavior. So I'm glad we were able to make those connections. But I do see that we do have a question in the chat. Crystal, if you're able to look at that.
Oh, Barbara, yes, please reach. Oh, that's somebody else. Hold on. Barbara, I do see your message. You can please reach out. My email is in the chat. Becky, when a child does not have a positive relationship with parents, how can other caring adults forge a relationship with that child? It's absolutely important that other caring adults create a relationship and bond. Sometimes that is truly the only way that children get past ACEs or trauma that has happened in their life. And one, I believe, just from what I've known, is going slow with building that relationship and meeting them where they're at. And it may look very different each day, where one day you feel like they've opened up a little bit and have talked to you a little more, and then the next day, not so much. It truly is just meeting them where they're at and taking it as slow as they need, giving them the support that they would like to have within your restrictions or your availability.
If there are no other questions, or if you think of something after the fact, Crystal so graciously provided her contact information, so thank you for that. I do just want to add, and I put this in the chat as well, in addition to the presentation today, we're also going to have a presentation next week, and that will be provided from one of our partners at University Hospital's Rainbow Babies Children's Hospital up in the Cleveland area, as well as the following week, a presentation from the Ohio Commission on Fatherhood, talking about fatherhood programs and the connections for supporting families. So I hope you all take the time to participate in those upcoming presentations as well. We can provide, I see some of the comments about a certificate for these. We do not have CEUs tied to these webinars, but we can provide like a confirmation of, spending an hour this afternoon and, what the training was about, if that would meet your needs. But thank you all so much for joining us today. And thank you so much, Crystal, for this great presentation and connecting the dots related to a lot of the Triple P Ohio work that we're doing. We're really excited to see so many of you joining us today and look forward to partnering with everybody throughout the rest of April as well as year long. So thank you again, and I hope everybody has a great rest of their day.